Just move on up toward your destination. Though you may find from time to time.
Who is WD4? This is Hawk School. We checked out the Godcast with Lord Jamar. He had Paul Guthrie on as a guest. What Paul Guthrie is claiming is that Muhammad is from India. So we've been doing some studying and some researching, cross-checking. We're not followers, you know what I'm saying? We want you to have the ability to lead yourself, to master yourself, you know what I mean? Because that's what real manhood is about. How many people have heard of Father Divine? Show of hands. Raise your hand if you heard Father Divine. Okay, well, for those of you who haven't heard of Father Divine, he claimed that he was the second coming of Jesus. He claimed to be God and was called Father by his followers. He was integrated and all lived together in the buildings where he charged people, what, like $2 a week or something to stay there. They used to have big feasts, you know what I'm saying? It's like 1920s, you know what I'm saying? This predates the Nation of Islam. Black man is God is not something brand new to the black community, because a lot of us have been taught that before Master Muhammad came and told the black man he was God, he never heard of that.
The city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, has a troubled racial history, full of segregation and disparity. Though these tensions still exist in many neighborhoods, Philadelphia has also been the backdrop for many important chapters in the struggle for racial equality. One of the most singular, enigmatic, and polarizing characters in this city's story is Father Divine, leader of the International Peace Mission movement. To many, he was just a rabble-rousing preacher, a nuisance who manipulated his way to power and wealth. To his countless followers, though, he was and is God incarnate. Father,
What they say? To his followers, he was and is God incarnate.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Father Divine began accumulating disciples in 1919 after buying a home in Sayville, Long Island. The
1919? Are y'all getting this?
practical bent of his preaching and his intense charisma soon attracted curious pilgrims from as far as the West Indies and Europe. At its zenith in the 1930s, Divine's Peace Mission movement exceeded 2 million followers, with hundreds of outposts across the United States and as far-flung as Australia and Switzerland. Followers championed racial integration at a time when segregation was the law.
I was gonna pause it, man, but we gotta break this back, man. Bring this back, man. You see where you heard where he said he got followers
Intense
from?
charisma soon attracted curious pilgrims from as far as the West Indies and Europe.
As far as the West Indies and Europe, 1919. Okay.
Divine's Peace Mission movement exceeded 2 million followers, with hundreds of outposts across the United States and as far-flung as Australia and Switzerland. Followers championed racial integration at a time when segregation was the law.
Pause that. I gotta get off the screen. Y'all gotta see this big screen so you can see what Father Divine's followers look like. The black man who called himself God in 1919. A mixed crowd, you know what I'm saying? So he had 2 million followers, no Instagram.
The law, and practiced celibacy, teetotalism, and modesty, while the rest of the country was recovering from the Roaring Twenties. They practiced a form of small-scale communism, but called their religion Americanism. They even accepted Father Divine seeming to violate his own commandments by taking 2 wives in his lifetime, both known as Mother Divine.
As I was doing the studying, my G finesse game's so strong, he said, well, the European lady that he married was the reincarnation of his black wife who had passed away. You know what I'm saying? So he really just got the same wife. I ain't really dug into it yet. We still digging, man. We still researching. But the beauty of Hawk School is that you ain't got to worry about us trying to dumb you down, try to trick you.
At last, I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole.
Uniquely enigmatic for an international faith leader, Father Divine's origins remain a mystery. No birth certificates or records exist from before he chose to make himself known as Reverend Major Jealous Divine at that house in...
He already taught the finesse gang, because now understand Jim Jones, that's another cult leader, and he was coming up under him talking about he was the reincarnation of Father Divine. They already know
National faith leader. Father Divine's origins remain a mystery. No birth certificates or records exist from before he chose to make himself known as Reverend Major Jealous Divine at that house in Sayville. One of the most puzzling elements of Father Divine's story was his wealth. Remarkably, he had managed to become the first black landowner in Sayville. Yet when the boisterous prayer of his disciples and the irritability of his white neighbors prompted an investigation by the district attorney's office, investigators found that Divine collected no money from followers to support the expanding movement.
And do not and will not receive compensation, remuneration, love offerings, donations, or anything of that sort for my spiritual work and activities from any individual. I'm a free gift to the world, gratis to mankind.
By the mid-30s, while many Americans could hardly afford to feed their families, Divine was being chauffeured from mansion to mansion in a private limousine. Peace Mission members ate massive weekly...
Look at that house. Look at that house. Now this house was made like a historical landmark. I'm gonna go ahead and check this out, big screen, full color shot it, because the house still stands. You see it? I'm talking about, he don't have no birth certificate, but my nigga Castle's still standing. Let's get back into it.
Peace Mission members ate massive weekly banquets and bought hundreds of properties for the church's use. The source of this seemingly miraculous financial...
Oh, bring that back.
Massive weekly banquets and bought...
Okay, now check that out. We're gonna zoom in on that, and what I'm gonna do, when I edit this, I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna zoom in and see if we can use the good quality of these cameras and all this HD shit, and we're gonna try to zoom in on the crowd and see who in the crowd.
Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
Let's see who in the VIP. It's Hawk School.
Banquets and bought hundreds of properties for the church's use. The source of this seemingly miraculous financial bounty has never been fully resolved, but a great portion seemed to come from followers tying their businesses to the movement's coffers, keeping only a fraction of their profits for themselves.
Bring that back, y'all see that, right? That's the barbershop. Outside the barbershop. You would think that was owned by the 5%.
Black man is God. Or no, I'm sick and tired of 5% of malarkey. It's malarkey. It's not 5%. It's malarkey. It's 5%, God. Of what?
This system allowed the movement to provide plentifully for all of its disciples. Many of the most dedicated lived in self-sufficient communal enclaves, where Divine's strict moral code was law. Even now, 50 years after Father Divine, in the language of the movement, laid his body down, a few enclaves exist, populated by individuals who remain faithful to him in every...
Look, that's the same house right there. All the people still living in there.
What was it that allowed Father Divine to command such unprecedented devotion?
Mother, is it significant that Father returned in the form of a dark-complected person?
Father coming in, God coming in that expression, he didn't have anything but his own Holy Spirit in mind to work with.
When I get a bitch, I got a bitch. Ooh, right on.
You know, Father said he didn't have a letter of the English alphabet. He came.
Now look, the white lady's still balling. That's Mother Divine. She's still balling. Cult still bumping. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get into it later in the video. You're going to see they still got centers now.
In an expression that didn't give him any credibility. No, and he didn't have any ancestors that he could look to give him credibility.
Now look at my boy, pause. Check that out. He dipped, suit, fly, you know what I'm saying? 1920s.
Well, tell me, what you gonna do with this one? Oh, man, shit. Well, you know how I am. I'm gonna run my thing, you know. It's all about the money game with me.
To give him credibility, he had nothing. And so it took God to do what he did do.
It is all because of graft and greed and selfishness and the impracticalness of humanity.
There were no other leaders that could take Father's place. I mean, Father was, his leadership was loving and magnetic and practical and logical.
Divine's charisma was legendary and instrumental in gaining his initial followers. Many adherents recall traveling from across the country, or farther, just to hear him speak. It was not, however, his only tool in building the peace mission movement. Dr. Leonard Norman Primiano has studied the phenomenon for close to 2 decades.
And what do you think allowed him to so successfully create a racially integrated community?
Well, it's sort of 2 things. The religious ideas themselves were very appealing to people because the religious ideas were about empowerment. And then there was the practical nature. The peace mission is often called a practical religion. So there was the practical nature that they weren't discussing a theology of heaven in the afterlife, but they were discussing a theology of heaven right here and right now.
So they weren't discussing a theology of heaven in the afterlife. They were discussing a theology of heaven right here and right now. You ever heard of that concept? This has been going on forever, man, okay? Forever. Let's get back to the video.
According to Dr. Primiano, this pragmatism was not confined to religion. Divine employed it also in his leadership.
Father Divine was very savvy about the media. And so Father Divine, I think, allowed the media in when it was serving the interests of the church, and also wanted to have followers themselves who were involved.
So he let the media in when it was beneficial to the movement. You know what I'm saying? Because now this is something you got to think about. Not only do my nigga got 2 million integrated followers who all look kind of fucking spooky, you know what I'm saying? But, what was I finna say? Oh yeah, it's 1919. Where does a nigga get a camera? That's what I'm saying. That's my thought. 2 million followers, no Instagram, big cameras. It's a photo shoot.
The interests of the church, and also wanted to have followers themselves who were involved with the media, spread the message.
Divine even foresaw challenges that might threaten his heaven on earth, and wove a response into the structure of the movement. He certainly allowed the ideals of his religion to dictate how the movement functioned, but he may also have allowed practical concerns to influence the tenets of his religion.
Well, I think gender segregation really came as a result of the fact that if you had attempted to integrate a community as he did back in the 1920s and 30s, if you had attempted to do that and you did not separate the genders, it's quite possible that there would have been legal restrictions against you. And so Father...
Okay, now legal restrictions against you. See, so what he talking about, the legal issues is 1924, Racial Integrity Act. He said the gender separation. He separated the sexes, the men from the women, for all you niggas who don't know what gender is.
Divine separated the genders, and even though he was integrating them, he was very smart. He thought, well, I'm not going to let them stop this community from existing simply for that reason.
And so, aided by personal magnetism and an empowering vision, Father Divine successfully built a movement of millions. This was not to last, though, and by the time that he moved his headquarters to Philadelphia in the mid-1940s, numbers were starting to drop. Depending on who you ask, Father Divine either discarded his physical form or died of natural causes on September 10th, 1965. Mother Divine took over spiritual leadership, but without Father's gift for inspiring new followers, she could only watch as old age and celibacy whittled membership.
Boss, right here. Okay, check this image out. Alright, look at that. Look at that. How old do you think they are, bro? You know what I'm talking about?
Whittled membership down to perhaps a few dozen dedicated individuals.
I think I present my best, but I know it's not enough.
Thank you for that very, very accurate answer.
The movement still owns and operates 3 centers in and around Philadelphia, and the house in Sayville, but most of its vast holdings have been sold off or lost. So
they own 3 centers, still own 3 centers.
Few followers and little remaining evidence, what is Father Divine's legacy?
Now this what kind of spooked me out. I don't know, man, but that's like some conspiracy shit, you know, I'm overanalyzing, but it's the Divine Lorraine, you know what I'm talking about? Are you seeing that? Oh yeah, I mean, wasn't Martin Luther King assassinated at the Lorraine Hotel?
I think Father Divine's legacy is really about this issue of race in America. That to look at this religion and who it attracted and the issues it was concerned with is really to look at the history of race in the United States. And so, of course, in an era when we're still discussing these basic issues about race in America and where African Americans still in many ways
Now check that out, he said in Europe they're still discussing these basic issues of race in America. They are.
And so,
in Europe.
Of course, in an era when we're still discussing these basic issues about race in America and where African Americans still in many ways feel put upon, the issues remarkably that Father Divine talked about are as relevant today as ever.
The things Father Divine talked about are as relevant today as ever. So we're going to get into this, but we'll make that another video for another day. Subscribe.
Well, you could ask yourself if you thought what happened in Ferguson would have happened if there was no use of racial terms. If you referred to someone as dark-complected or light-complected, rather than a so-and-so or a name, if the people could just learn that much from Father, just that much.
Learn that much. Break the matrix.
It's the whole world.
Father Divine's religious following is dwindling, but his true legacy may be that of a pioneer of the American civil rights movement. Through his visionary ideas and the utopian communities he formed, he demonstrated that people of all races and all economic backgrounds could live together in absolute harmony. These ideas, so radical in their own time, are integral to the fight for equality and economic justice in America today.
Now isn't that wonderful?
Father Divine, first one to come with the whole black man is God, heaven on earth ideology. We're going to see who was teaching him, man. Everybody's being taught by somebody, man. Everybody's a student and everybody's a teacher. I'm a student, you're a teacher. You know how it go. You know what it is. Imam_OG. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notification, and right on to the real, death to the fake. Peace.
Just move on up toward your destination. Though you